of Africa in Business. A very good afternoon to you wherever on the continent or in the world that you may be. Let's start off this afternoon with the latest news locally, domestically, as well as internationally. I'm Thami Ngubeni. Welcome to it.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Thami. Looking at your top stories, South Africa's National Police Commissioner announces the establishment of a new task team to investigate police service members. And renewed talks have begun in Oman between the United States and Iran. Your latest news, greetings to our listeners. South Africa's National Police Commissioner Thami Ngubeni has announced the establishment of a new task team which will investigate police service members who were implicated at the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry. President Cyril Ramaphosa established the commission following the KwaZulu-Natal Province Police Commissioner Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi's allegations, including that of corruption among senior police officials. The establishment of the team follows a directive from the presidency prompted by the submission of an interim report from the commission. He made the announcement in Pretoria, where he and the new National Director of Public Prosecutions, Advocate Endi Mutibi, addressed the media on action to be taken against those implicated at the Madlanga Commission. The team will be supported by the National Prosecutions Authority.
It is important to note that some of these cases were already being investigated by the Political Killings Task Team, the Organized Crime and the Serious and Violent Crimes units and teams. However, now that there is this team that we have established, it will then take over these referrals and start the investigation.
The South African National Defence Force has begun outlining preparations for the 2026 Armed Forces Day, set to be commemorated on the 21st of February. The national event will take place in Thohoyandou in the Limpopo province and will honour service members of the Defence Force while also remembering fallen soldiers, including those who died during the sinking of the SS Mendi in 1917. The plans were revealed during a media briefing in Thulamela. Thulamela Municipality Mayor Councillor Sarah Rambuda.
Thulamela is ready to host 2026 National Armed Forces Day. On Armed Forces Day, we proudly salute the courageous men and women who serve in a nation's military, including active duty, reserve, and veteran personnel. It encourages citizens to reflect on the importance of national defense and the need for ongoing support of Armed Forces Day.
The South African Early Childhood Development Teachers United has filed a class action lawsuit to litigate a number of government departments in what it terms humiliation and violation of employment rights for grade R educators and those who have already retired from the sector. This followed a series of unsuccessful talks with the Departments of Basic Education, Social Development and the Presidency. The organization says most of its 12,000 members countrywide have been forced to go on retirement without receiving their pensions, UIF payouts or medical aid cover. The majority of them have been absorbed by the Basic Education Department after working under Department of Social Development for many years. The group's legal representative, Dr. Bafana Langa.
We are filing a lawsuit in making sure that we put the government to accountability of a negligence of since 1996, even before. But we're looking at the class grade R, which we believe that it was unfairly due to the labor practices meaning treated. They were also not absorbed, constantly being told that they are not part of the system and being excluded from pension fund payouts. When they are sent off from schools, they are only been given a letter to go to SASSA for social grounds as if they are becoming a charity case.
A Nigerian court has ordered the British government to pay $27 million to each of the families of 21 coal miners killed in 1949 by the colonial administration in the southeast of the country. The colonial police, made up of Nigerians and Europeans, shot dead workers striking for better conditions. Dozens more were injured in what the state-run news agency of Nigeria described as one of the most notorious acts of repression under British rule in Nigeria. Families and rights groups have led a decade-long campaign for official acknowledgement and compensation. Renewed talks have begun in Oman between the United States and Iran as Washington seeks to curb Tehran's nuclear and missile program. The negotiations are believed not to include face-to-face meetings, but are being conducted via Omani diplomats. Iran says it remains willing to discuss its nuclear activities, but insists its missile defense is not for negotiation. The BBC's Persian Nafise.
Both teams have moved to the Omani Foreign Minister's house. They had meeting with him, and still Iran insists that these sessions of talks also is indirect. Although channels close to Lebanese Hezbollah and also to Tehran itself have claimed that Iranian officials are open to possible direct talk if the atmosphere of these talks goes well.
Recapping on your top stories, South Africa's National Police Commissioner Thami Ngubeni has announced the establishment of a new task team which will investigate the police service members who are implicated at the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry. Channel Africa News, I'm Onelin Nsinsi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, Leicester City docked 6 points for financial breaches, while Saudi League warns Ronaldo and amid rather doubts over his future. I'll tell you more at 4:30.
Business, trade, and investment opportunities that put the continent first. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni.
It is a very good afternoon to you, Ghana. Good afternoon, Angola, Zambia, Zimbabwe. Good afternoon, Africa. Welcome to Africa in Business on Channel Africa. I'm Thami Ngubeni. It is Friday, the 6th of February. Coming up this hour, Ghana and Zambia have agreed to deepen their decades-old bilateral relations. And it's just 3 days before the start of the 2026 Investing in African Mining Indaba. That and a whole lot more coming up for you this afternoon on Africa in Business.
Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
We begin here with Kenya's President William Ruto. He has announced new tax relief measures aimed at easing the cost of living for low and middle income earners. Under the new proposals, workers earning up to $231 a month will be exempt from income tax, while those earning up to $387 will see their tax rate reduced to 25%. President Ruto says the changes will see around 1.5 million Kenyans pay no income tax at all. Channel Africa's economics reporter Innocent Samosa has the details.
President William Ruto says the proposed tax change aims to boost disposable income, support the middle class, and stimulate economic growth through increased spending and investment.
We are now saying that any Kenyan who earns less than 30,000 shillings will not pay any taxes. That is how progressively we are going to make sure that we manage the cost of living.
Do these tax relief measures genuinely ease the cost of living pressures for low and middle income Kenyans, or are they likely to be offset by rising prices and other indirect taxes? Economist A.B. Ajina weighs in.
By the government raising the taxes, this eventually did see a lot of concern from the public, indicating that the country was already heavily taxed, and the measures that the government has introduced in terms of reducing the income tax, this has been well received across many pockets of Kenyans who have already been saddled with a high cost of living. So by reviewing these taxes, it will be having a profound effect, especially when it comes to increasing household spending and reducing the economic pressures that has continued to be a thorn in the flesh for many Kenyans. Well, looking at the current state of affairs, we do know that quite a number of Kenyans have been experiencing a slowdown.
According to Ajina, the measure will ease the burden on many Kenyans as more than 2 million currently pay minimal or no income tax.
Well, this is not only going to ease the pressures on the backs of many Kenyans who have already been agitating for the government to cut down on value-added tax, income tax, and corporate income tax. These are some of the key issues that the government has been trying to address, even as the country prepares for an election in a year's time. Well, this is, of course, listening to some of the projections from the National Treasury. By reducing and avoiding to have this bracket of people paying taxes is not going to have a significant impact, considering right now that the government is looking towards diversifying its revenue-raising strategies.
He adds that this will significantly increase consumer spending.
According to the World Bank, Kenya's economy in 2025 and 2026 was to grow at about 4.9%, whereas the government had projected a growth of nearly 5%, which has been revised downwards. And looking at the latest PMI index, Kenya's January PMI index did show some good numbers at almost 51 points.
For Channel Africa News, I'm Innocent Samosa in Johannesburg, South Africa.
It is exactly 11 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African Time. Joining us for our weekly business roundup this afternoon is none other than Victor Khomoswana, author of Africa is Open for Business and Africa Bounces Back. Victor is also the Executive Director for Marketing and Communication at the University of Limpopo. A very good Friday to you, Victor. Good to have you with us once again.
Good to talk to you again, Thami. Good Friday afternoon.
Here's a good place to start. This is a gentleman we actually had a conversation with just yesterday, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina. We literally just had him on air yesterday, and he was commenting around the need for African governments to attract investment as a means of development, because the era of aid and grant is fast coming to an end. Now, he is the former president of the African Development Bank, and he still remains very active as far as investment on the African continent is concerned.
And very respected by people like myself, because he really shook things up at the African Development Bank. Former Nigerian Minister of Agriculture as well, Thami, Dr. Adesina, who's saying 12 out of 20 countries, fastest growing economies in the world, are often African. But still, this region, Africa, which has 1.3 billion people, attracts only 6% of the global foreign direct investment, according to the United Nations, Conference on Trade and Development. So if you have that kind of an imbalance, he says, well, we're expecting the GDP to grow to something like 2.5 trillion when it was 1.4 2015 by 2030, that is. And therefore, the only way is to create a market maker. Remember, working at the African Development Bank means he knows a lot of people with money, people who are willing to invest what is called investment capital, patient capital, people who put money into development finance institutions, who are willing to put their money to developmental causes and say, we will like to get our money, but we're willing to charge a lesser interest rate. We are willing to wait longer because we believe in the developmental impact of the money we make. On the other hand, there are CEOs who have retained income in the form of cash that they could invest. And then on the other side of this equation, as a market maker, will be the governments that need finance. So he's saying you can't be relying on aid any longer, because aid will always be challenged. Do you fund South African crime prevention, or do you fund humanitarian aid in the Sudan? You're always going to have more people needing aid money than you can give. So the better way is to facilitate global investment, which is why they have this Global Africa Investment Summit that is leading, which will take place in Angola later this year.
And let's move on to our next story as well, Victor, around Malawi. The Reserve Bank did close the Finance Bank for a number of reasons. They deemed them unsafe. They said that they were protecting the interests of the depositors. But now they are expected to compensate them?
Yeah, exactly. And Thami, this is a small country. Malawi is a small economy. The Finance Bank of Malawi was not a big bank. But the reason I found the story interesting is this happened in 2005 when the African market was starting to consolidate its banks generally. They went to look for small banks and either force them to consolidate, either sell the bank to a larger bank, or be able to have to raise more capital. And the smaller niche banks were not able to do that, but now they hit them with know your customer requirements, which would be anything in South African terms, they call it FICA, the Financial Intelligence Center, which forces people to know a lot more, account for where the depositors who are using their banks get the money from. All those kind of things. What the Supreme Court is saying, in 2005, when that happened, the closure of the bank for what they called violation of know your customer requirements was necessary, when the action was necessary, but the action did not fit the offense. So the crime was way too light. They could have used other things. And this is teaching governments of Africa that you might think you are able to call the shots and dictate, but you can always be taken to task 20 years later, as we can see, because this case has been going on since 2006.
And so at that point, the bank's liabilities did exceed their assets, and they were below that minimum regulatory requirement that was set by the Reserve Bank. So what does it mean now for Finance Bank?
It wasn't even that. I mean, it was just know your customer. So let's talk about, people can relate better to mobile telephony, because companies will force you. Remember when Nigeria fined MTN a lot of money for not being able to, if we can use it, RICA the SIM cards. In other words, not being able to account for the people who use SIM cards on your network. In banking, it's called KYC, know your customer. Because remember, banks have to account. When I come in with a bag full of money, they're expected to ask me where I got the money from, if it's more than a regular deposit. So they were not failing to meet capital requirements. They were actually not compliant with the know your customer, which means...
Oh, how unfortunate. I can just hear that beep. Victor Khomuswana disconnected there. But we certainly will be getting him back on the line to continue this conversation around the Reserve Bank of Malawi, having closed the Finance Bank of Malawi on the 13th of January in 2014, and some of the regulations around that. We've got Victor Khomuswana back. Victor, I would like us, however, just looking at the time today, to look at some of the other stories that have been highlighted and that you found very interesting today. And one of those is around those 469 diamond stones that were found in Angola.
Kilometers of the border, Lunda Norte, which is the province of Angola, when Angola shares the border with the DRC. 604 DRC citizens were repatriated because they were found to have moved across the border from the DRC into Angola to illegally explore for diamonds. And then, so it's an operation that started late 2025, where the government of Angola is saying, let's go and impound as much of the illegally possessed or explored or mined diamonds, because if we don't do that, we are going to continue not being able to, one, account for our diamond industry, but two, we are not going to be able to stop human trafficking and all the other things that go with illegal capital flows in the form of mineral smuggling. So it's a very good thing, because Indiama, which is the state mining company in charge of diamonds, will be able to then be taking possessions of these stones as what they call faithful custodian.
And finally, we see the United Arab Emirates. They've committed quite a healthy sum of money in humanitarian aid to Sudan.
Yeah. This is what I don't like. U.S. mobilizing $1.5 billion, and United Arab Emirates, which has been accused by Sudan of supporting the Rapid Support Forces, the rebel group, now raising this amount of money in the name of humanitarian aid. The reason I'm looking at this story of interest is there is a story that we don't talk about. Sudan is suffering a lot of sanctions from the U.S., except for one thing, Thami. It's called acacia gum. And this is an ingredient that's produced more than 70% of it in the Sudan. And why does America want it? Because it is what they call miracle emulsifier. When they make Coca-Cola and sodas, when they make tablets, it's what keeps the soda from not separating into the oils that are in there as flavoring agents. So it's a very essential ingredient that can only really be found in the Sudan. And that's why, among other things, the U.S. will mobilize aid for the Sudan while it continues to impose sanctions. This particular gum is exempted from the trade sanctions that the U.S. imposes on the Sudan. So I'm just saying, on the surface, it looks like an aid story, but on the surface, it's actually protecting the interests of Coca-Cola, Pepsi, and a whole lot of pharmaceuticals that are in the U.S.
Always worth a dig deeper. There always are motives and beneficiaries along the value chain. Victor Khomusana, always a pleasure.
Thank you, Thami.
Thank you. That's Victor Khomusana, author of Africa is Open for Business and Africa Bounces Back, highlighting some of the leading stories and developments as far as business is concerned on the African continent. It's gone exactly 20 minutes after 4.
Channel Africa is evolving, and so are you. Stay connected wherever you are with our brand new website and mobile app. Stream your favorite shows, catch up on African news, culture, and conversations, all at your fingertips.
Africa is just a tap away.
Your world, your stories, now on the go.
Stay connected wherever you are.
Visit channelafrica.co.za or download the Channel Africa app today. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
With just 3 days left, let's talk drama. Pimville feels like one of those shows that pulls the country into the same story. It has a strong cast, real emotion, and a storyline that hits close to home.
Africa in Business. Africa in Business delivers key insights and real-time updates on Africa's growing markets with Thami Ngubeni. The African perspective on Channel Africa.
Channel Africa.
It has gone exactly 22 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African Time. South Africa's Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, Park Stau, has signed a landmark China-Africa agreement that grants South Africa duty-free access to the Chinese market. The deal is expected to significantly enhance the competitiveness of South African exports as the country steps up its efforts to diversify its export destinations and drive trade-led economic growth. For more on this, we're joined on the line by trade analyst Vue Njongwana. A very good afternoon to you, Vue. Good to have you with us on Africa in Business.
Thank you, Thami. How are you?
I'm awesome, thank you, and I hope you are too. So let's look at the significant agreement that has been signed between the two countries. How significant is it really? And what does it bode for the trade relationship that South Africa has with China? What makes this a landmark deal?
Look, the significance of it is obviously contextual, and what has been happening in the global market when it comes to trade since President Trump has taken over the presidency of America. And the significance of it naturally is in the fact that it will allow South African commodities, South African goods, duty-free access into the Chinese economy. And then obviously what the impact that will have is that it will reduce the goods, and therefore China will be a more lucrative export destination. And I think in your introduction, you also mentioned the issue of diversification of trade and trade or export destinations. And the importance of that is that it becomes some sort of a protection for South Africa's economy, especially in the global politics that are playing out currently.
And which of the South African export sectors stand to benefit most from this duty-free access to China?
Well, it's mostly our minerals and our agriculture, and maybe to some extent our motor manufacturing industry, those are usually the ones that take the lead. Because when you look at, I think we must look at it contextually and compare it to AGOA and what we were exporting to the US through AGOA. So what this trade deal does for us is that to some extent it gives us other avenues to export similar goods, such as our agricultural goods and our minerals.
For some reason, viewer, your line sounds a little bit muffled and compromised. So let's just be a bit mindful of that so we can just try and get a bit of a better connection. So South Africa already does run a trade deficit with China. Could this duty-free access realistically narrow that gap, do you think?
It will narrow the gap without a doubt, because if you look at what we import from China, we import manufactured goods, capital goods, and what we tend to export are consumption goods, agricultural goods to China. So it's very important that we have better access into that economy. Also, you find that the population of the economy, of China, is quite a big population. So they may be able to receive a lot more than, if I would say comparatively, than America. So that will definitely reduce that trade deficit that we have with China. Can you hear me better?
Yes, thank you so much. And how might the United States interpret South Africa's engagement with China? Just a couple of days ago, we had the confirmation of the renewal of AGOA from President Donald Trump. Is this likely to affect trade relations with the United States, especially, in the light of AGOA?
Look, Thami, to be quite honest, I think that ship has sailed already, in the sense that we have to diversify, and we can't really think too much of what the US think of our decision to diversify, because they've unfortunately presented themselves as an unreliable trading partner. So yes, we've been included in AGOA for the next year, but AGOA has always been weaponized against South Africa. And so I think it was inevitable that we would get to this point. And I think it's important that we are at this point, so that we've got stronger negotiating leverage when it comes to our relations with the US.
Right. And finally, as we wrap up, we taking a look at Kenya as well. They also signed a duty-free access to the Chinese market. Are we likely to see China opening up its markets to more African countries, not just South Africa and not just Kenya, as in this case in point?
Yes. If you look at China, Thami, China has been offering a lot of, should I call them, sweet deals. And the reason why I refer to them as sweet deals is that, number one, the commodities tend to be a lot cheaper and affordable. But secondly, there's a lot less political expectation that comes with those deals, unlike the AGOA, which has got some political clauses attached to them. So they are really positioning themselves as a lucrative trading partner. And I think if I speak comparatively with the US has got something to learn there, because if they reduce the politics around their trade, they themselves may be able to retain their position as a lucrative trading partner. So definitely, unfortunately, President Trump has kind of introduced a lot of volatility when it comes to trade, not only for Africa and South Africa, but many other countries in the world. And every country now is trying to stabilize away from the US. So definitely there'll be more trade deals that emanate between African countries and China. Foreseeable future, definitely.
Viwe Njongwana, thank you so much for that update as we look at South Africa-China relations, but really China and Africa trade relations. That's Viwe Njongwana, trade analyst, taking us to exactly 4:30 p.m. Central African time. Let's head over now to our markets desk, where Chanduko Ligege is standing by with your latest market indicators.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Thami. Good afternoon. $1 is trading at 16 Rand 16 in South Africa, Botswana 13 Pula 02, Namibia 16 Namibian dollars 16, Zambia 18 Kwacha 98, Kenya 128 shilling 22, Ethiopia 155 birr 24, Uganda 3,000 shilling 542, Tanzania 2,000 shilling 571, $1 in Nigeria is 1,000 naira 367, Egypt 46 Egyptian pound 90, Tunisia 2 dinar 86, Algeria 129 dinar 01, Morocco 90 ram 11. In Angola, the dollar is 911 kwanza 13, while the Congolese franc is at 2,201 to the US dollar. Commodities, gold is trading at $4,932, platinum at $2,045 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil at $67.56 a barrel. And that is all from me. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chanduko Ligege.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
And from the sporting desk with your latest business of sport news, here is Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you so much, Thami. A very good afternoon from the Sports Desk. So the Saudi Pro League has warned Cristiano Ronaldo no individual, however significant, determines decisions beyond their own club amid doubts over his future at Al Nassr. Now, the Portugal forward was left out of Al Nassr's squad for Monday's Saudi Pro League game against Al Riyadh. Now, Portuguese outlet A Bola reported that Ronaldo refused to play, having grown satisfied with just how the club had been run by Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund. Now, the BBC Sport has been told that the former Real Madrid his former Real Madrid teammate Karim Benzema's move to the league leaders Al Hilal from Al Ittihad earlier on this week was the principal reason for Ronaldo's frustration at Al Nassr. So both Al Nassr as well as Al Hilal, the country's most successful club with 19 league titles, are among the teams controlled by the PIF, which also controls Newcastle United out in the Premier League. In a statement, a Saudi Pro League spokesperson said the Saudi Pro League is structured around a simple principle, and that is that every club operates independently under the same rules. Now, clubs have also their own boards, their own executives, and their own football leadership. Decisions on recruitment, spending, as well as strategy sit with those clubs within a financial framework designed, of course, to ensure sustainability as well as competitive balance. Now, that framework applies equally across the league, also saying no individual, however significant, determines decisions beyond their own club. Ronaldo, by the way, joined Al Nassr back in 2022 after leaving Manchester United mid-season, becoming the best paid player in football history with an annual salary of $199 million, but has only won the Arab Club Championships Cup with the side. Onto this now, Atletico Madrid sporting director Matteo Almani, as well as the manager of the side Diego Simeone, continued to contradict each other in front of the media as the transfer window entered its final week earlier on this week. Simeone has been insistent on bringing in more players, while Almani has been more cautious about what the team needs. Now, Phil Tretomolades is a La Liga correspondent, and he explains the power dynamics between the two at the club.
Alamai has been saying, listen, we're going to try and bring some players in, but if we can't, then, we've got a good squad already and you've got the youth academy. So, you do what you can And Simeone has clearly been a little bit affronted by those kind of comments. And the last press conference he gave, when he was asked about signing, he said, "Listen, I'm just the coach here. You know, I'll trade whatever they give me." He is not just the coach at Atletico Madrid. We know that, but he's obviously a little bit put out that maybe he's not quite the top dog at Atletico Madrid. I mean, he is, but the Alemany has come in and has a lot of power, a lot of influence in this club.
Right, on to this story now. Leicester City have been docked 6 points by the English Football League for breaching financial rules. The deduction will be applied immediately, meaning the Foxes will fall from 17th to 20th position in the Championship and are only outside the relegation zone on goal difference. It comes after Leicester City were charged by the Premier League in May for a profit and sustainability breach in the 3 years up to the 2023-2024 season. Now, Leicester were relegated from the top flight last season and are currently without a permanent manager after Martí Cifuentes was sacked in January. In a statement, Leicester said they were disappointed with the decision, branding it disproportionate. The club said it's reviewing the decision in full and considering their options as well. So under PSR, Premier League clubs cannot lose more than $120 million over 3 years, but the figures is reduced now by $30 million for every season a club spends outside the top flight. Leicester's accounts for the period ending the 30th of June 2024 showed a loss of $29.4 million. In the 2022-2023 accounts, Leicester confirmed a $99 million loss, while in the 12 months up to May 2022, the club lost a record $120 million. Now, those figures do not take into account the add-ons, the costs such as building infrastructure, as well as investment in women's football that the Premier League as well as the EFL view as the general interests of clubs. And that concludes your sports news this afternoon on Channel Africa. It is 16:36 p.m. Central African Time. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, do send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us. The newsroom line is +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Mosibu Dimakura. Have a great sporting weekend.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. From markets to innovation. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni covers it all. With Africa's future in focus, Channel Africa, the African perspective.
It is exactly 4:37 Central African Time as we turn our focus to relations between Ghana and Zambia. Ghana's President John Dramani Mahama has concluded his 3-day visit to Zambia that has seen a number of key bilateral and development cooperation agreements being asserted in priority areas like agriculture and food security, energy, mining, trade and investment that are set to begin and set to benefit not only the two nations but broadly the African continent. Our Zambia correspondent Arthur Davies Sikopo has more on this story.
He arrived in Zambia with a mission and some immediate results like waiving off visa fees for the two nations' peoples, and now being actualized as announced during a meeting of the two presidents, John Mahama and Hakainde Hichilema, the host. The visa waiver is also in line with achieving the African Union's Agenda 2063 of having free movement and trade among its member states, as Hichilema and Mahama speak.
Africa does the least trade with itself. It's criminal. It is taboo. It's unacceptable. You look at the size collectively of the African economy, but look at what we do with each other. Very, very little.
The agreements we signed today, especially the decision to allow visa-free travel between our two countries, are more than diplomatic instruments. They are statements of trust.
The visit has also seen 10 bilateral agreements being signed in various areas of cooperation, including health, security, transport, disaster risk management, air services, among others. The agreements see the two countries foster their desired relations, says President Mahama.
Our cooperation in health, education, air transport, defense and other areas reflect our shared commitment to finding African solutions.
Zambia, that has a number of newly discovered gold sites dotted around, is eager to learn from Ghana on gold mining and other minerals, considering that Ghana's GDP is heavily supported by gold and oil.
And we're having challenges on managing the sector properly here. And Ghanaians have been at it for longer. And today we were able to share experiences.
Zambia and Ghana can be described as twins, as they both defaulted in debt repayment, forcing the two to initiate debt restructuring with their external creditors under an IMF program to restore confidence, a path they both took, and progress is being noted. It is by this that both the countries pledged to share ideas on how best they can trade with each other and other African countries to ensure they achieve sustainable and stable economic status. Hijilema speaks.
Debt issues, how they came out of the debt, how we did it ourselves, not completely out of it, restructuring our debts, very similar paths. And we now are saying we want to do more.
Mahama also shares his country's thoughts.
Ghana and Zambia seem to be twins of the same mother, going through the same economic and financial challenges.
The West African leader has also stepped into Zambia's parliament and was given a privilege to address the House as he urged the lawmakers across the continent to prioritize the people they represent above self.
Parliament and the judiciary must work independently in the public interest. Leaders must respect their oath of office to respect the Constitution. In our sub-region of West Africa, democracy is backsliding with a return to military dictatorships. Ghana is, however, on a mission to prove that democracy works.
The Ghanaian leader later visited Embassy Park, the presidential burial site, and paid tribute to late 5 presidents of the Republic of Zambia who are buried there, winding up his tour of duty in the Southern African country as he met the business community at a business forum. President John Mahama urged African entrepreneurs to look beyond borders and trade in different countries of the continent. Reporting for Channel Africa in Lusaka, Zambia, I am Arthur Davis Scopo.
It is exactly 4:41 Central African time. Now, to further unpack Ghana and Zambia trade relations, we joined now on the line by economist based in Zambia, Trevor Hambai. A very good afternoon to you, Trevor. Good to have you with us. Welcome.
Thank you very much and good afternoon to you.
So, Trevor, how significant is President John Dramani Mahama's visit to Zambia, and what does it signal economically?
So firstly, obviously, you appreciate the fact that in terms of the presidential visit is that it strengthens bilateral relations. And I think it is so important that the African countries are able to strengthen their bilateral relations. Technically speaking, what you do find is that the trade in between African countries is around between 14 and 15% in terms of trade. We trade more with European countries than we trade within our own continent. And this is something that needs to change, especially with the position around having to be able to do value addition. And I think that is the biggest significance that we're looking at. What you do realize is that they have also mentioned the issue of lifting visa requirements between the two countries. Yes, it is important. What you do find, we have a global trade that is in terms of trade that we have among countries. It is so important to be able to make it easy for the movements of the people between the countries.
And you speak about movement and trade flows between the two countries. Now, over the years, these have not been that big. What are the main structural barriers, do you believe, that are limiting that stronger trade between these two countries?
So you'll appreciate the issues around logistics within the African continent has been slow in terms of development. We are creating greater logistical development between continental countries in Europe than we do in African countries. Recently, obviously, there have been improvements in that area, especially in the airspace. But the issues around land and sea freight between countries on the African continent has not developed as well. With the development of the Africa free trade zone, this will be important to be able to drive. So the main challenge has been logistics, and this is what we needed to be able to address.
Let's look at perhaps the sectors that would present themselves as the most immediate opportunities for increase in bilateral trade between the two countries, given that some of the MOUs are centered around agriculture, mining, as well as manufacturing.
So the African continent's best resource that we do have is in the agriculture sector because of the vast amount of arable land that we do have and the number of water bodies that are on the continent. So this is the greatest potential that is presented within the African continent. Ghana is very strong. I think they do a lot of exports in cocoa. And this is an issue that we can develop on the African continent, especially in value addition. And secondly, of course, the mineral resources in the African continent in terms of mining is important. The third aspect that is also important is that we need to be able to build the culture around the development, the tourism sector, that we have got greater potential within the tourism sector within the continent because of the fact that the population is growing. By 2030. The African continent is going to get 2 billion inhabitants. This creates a very big market, and this is an important aspect. So the potential within the African continent is still there in terms of the different sectors that we're actually looking at.
Right. So the meeting between the two leaders also explored trade and investment opportunities, particularly around the framework of the AfCFTA. How can Ghana as well as Zambia leverage the African Continental Free Trade Area to move beyond agreements? We've got those now. How are they going to ensure that these agreements have been breathed life into and they have tangible, real trade outcomes that are measurable?
So there are a number of areas that you'll be looking at. Yes, in terms of creating tangible results, it's important that obviously there's development around the infrastructure. In terms of road networks between the countries, there's development, of course, in the area of airspace. Is that can they establish a link for air freight to come from Central Africa into West Africa? And this is an issue that requires bilateral agreements between the countries. These areas need to be practical. To be able to do this, it is important that they loop in the private sector to be able to drive the agenda of developing the issues around infrastructure, the issues around airspace.
Right.
It must be sustainable and profitable, and the private sector is the one that can do this.
Trevor Hambai, thank you so much for your insight as developments continue to unfold between Ghana and hopefully these MOUs will translate into some real tangible and measurable trade outcomes. We thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you very much. You have a good day.
You have a great one too. That was economist based in Zambia, Trevor Hambai. He takes us to exactly 4:48.
Got something to say? Are you passionate about issues that matter? Do you have a voice that deserves to be heard? Well, we've got the perfect platform for you. Call in or drop us a WhatsApp on +27 63 406 9126. And we will call you back so you could have your say and be part of the conversation.
30 years of age. I just turned 30 on the 15th of November. So that's who I am, you know.
It's not just talk. It's your chance to air your views. Share your opinion. Engage with a community that values your perspective. Follow us on our social media. Visit our website at www.channelafrica.co.za and get ready to share your views on Channel Africa, the African perspective. Stay ahead with Africa in Business, where Thami Ngubeni unpacks your go-to source for Africa's economic trends and development.
In a couple of minutes' time, well, more than a couple of minutes actually, at the top of the hour, we'll have Vous d'Afrique taking over the airways as we move from the English broadcasting to the French. And the captain of that ship is right here. Madame Joël, bonjour.
Bonjour Thami, bonjour à tous les éditeurs de Channel Africa. Tout à l'heure sur Vue d'Afrique, on parlera du président du Congo, Denis Sassou Nguesso, qui a annoncé ce jeudi sa candidature à l'élection présidentielle de mars 2026, mais aussi de la Côte d'Ivoire. L'ancien chef de l'État, Laurent Gbagbo, réitère son opposition catégorique au 4e mandat de Alassane Ouattara. Et nous parlerons également de l'agence de notation américaine S&P Global Ratings qui a déclaré que l'Afrique s'apprête à affronter une année délicate sur le front de la dette. C'est tout à l'heure sur Vue d'Afrique. Merci Thami.
Merci beaucoup. C'est Joël and she'll be with you at 5 p.m.
Ritmos e Cultura com Jacob Tivani. Meus ouvintes do Ritmos e Cultura, hoje em linha com uma das grandezas da música moçambicana, porque não? Ele que é um dos kings da marrabenta, Mother Muda in the building.
É um prazer enorme estar a fazer parte deste programa. Deixe-me só saudar. Boa tarde a todos os ouvintes que me ouvem neste preciso momento. Meu nome é Mother Muda, de Alau Fanelo Estarapo, Gás de Água da Canhela é Mabiscato. Eu vou saudar de uma maneira diferente. Ah, titabuya mwanango, tiduma tifika giane. Ah, titabuya mwanango, tiduma tifika giane. Ani motivelo ababa yena otiva mina haikonama. Ani motivelo anona yena otiva wahimbo wadwa. Cá estou eu, irmão, para conversarmos, para falarmos um pouco de tudo. Estou aqui, estou aberto. Eu estou muito feliz porque é a primeira vez que eu falo nesta rádio, falo para os ouvintes, então estou muito feliz.
Ritmos e Cultura com Jacob Tivani. Todos os domingos, das 20 às 21 horas.
Stay ahead with Africa in Business, where Thami Ngubeni unpacks your go-to source for Africa's economic trends and development.
It is exactly 9 minutes to 5 p.m. Central African Time. The 2026 Investing in Africa Mining Indaba will be held from the 9th to the 12th of February at the Cape Town International Convention Centre in South Africa. Now, this year's event will be themed Stronger Together, Progress Through Partnerships. Neville Machi, Chief Executive Officer of Brand South Africa, says Mining Indaba serves as a powerful platform to showcase South Africa's mineral wealth and reaffirm the country's position as one of the leading mining powerhouses on the global stage. For more on this, we're joined on the line by Neville Machi, the Chief Executive Officer at Brand South Africa. Good to have you with us. Welcome to Africa in Business.
Thank you very much and good afternoon to all the listeners.
So let's focus on how Brand South Africa is planning to leverage the Mining Indaba this year to position the country as what it is, a top investment destination for mining.
Yes, 100%. I mean, Mining Indaba is a huge platform coming to South Africa. As you know, it's done annually in Cape Town. And the intention from Brand South Africa is to ensure that we position South Africa as a destination of choice for investors. But in particular, our focus is on localization and value addition at source. Most of our raw materials are exported in raw form, and then we import all the finished products. And our directive is clear that we have to encourage value addition at source so that we are able to add value on our products, on our raw materials, encourage new investments, and also build a new value chain in terms of the industry.
And what are the ways that Brand South Africa highlights South Africa's competitive advantages in mining in order to attract those foreign investors? And if you could maybe just talk to us as well about how it's working with the mining companies as well as government to ensure that foreign investment translates into tangible economic benefits for the country.
Yeah, critical for us is, of course, you can't just have the opportunities in limbo without investors looking at those opportunities. So the packaging is very, very important. We're working closely with the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, Department of Minerals, Energy and Minerals, Resources and Energy. Of course, they are the ones as the custodian of the sector that are driving, of course, the packaging. But that packaging doesn't go on its own. It requires funding, and it requires the funding partners to come on board. And that for us is the cherry on top to ensure that the funders are clear in terms of their requirements for investors and how they're able to, of course, drive that element of packaging of our investments, but linking those packages to potential investors. What is also important for us is driving the localization agenda, the participation of local investors in the value addition at source. It's very important for us because that element of ensuring local participation is critical to ensuring the sustainable sustenance of the sector.
You've referred to South Africa as Africa's leading mining giants. Now, are there any specific campaigns or initiatives at the Indaba that are aimed at changing perceptions of South Africa's mining sector and also then positioning the country as a leader in the critical minerals sector?
Yeah, so for us, we are quite clear in terms of the agenda of South Africa and its position within the continent. Of course, there are raw materials that we don't have as South Africa that of course, that you find in other regions. You have more sectors, more minerals in other countries that which is where we are wanting to leverage on the partnership between ourselves and, of course, our sister countries. All this falls under the framework of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. And we're working closely with, of course, the Commissioner for Infrastructure within the continent to assist us in that leveraging of our sister countries. For our sessions at Mining Indaba, we will be having a delegation from Botswana as well as the DRC that will be participating in our session. That in itself shows that Pan-African approach, which is what we are focusing on.
That Pan-African approach are very much needed as well. Are there other partnerships with international investors as well, or countries that are being showcased at the Mining Indaba this year?
Yes, there's a plethora of countries that will be participating at Mining Indaba this year. So as part of the full week of Mining Indaba will be engagements that have been preset. So meetings with respective companies that are looking at mining opportunities within South Africa, not only South Africa, but the continent itself. We'll also be engaging with, as I've indicated earlier, the funding institutions. As you witnessed this week, South Africa is now a Class A member of the AfricaInBank. So all that really opens up great opportunities for companies to tap into the sector and, of course, leverage on the support.
Well, Neville, wishing you a very successful Mining Indaba this year at the Cape Town International Convention Centre. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. That's Neville Maki. He is the Chief Executive Officer at Brand South Africa. And that is the conversation that closes us off for this week. This has been the Friday edition of Africa in Business on Channel Africa. From myself, Thami Ngubeni, and the rest of the team, you have yourself a splendid afternoon further and an even better weekend ahead. We're going to leave you with the French desk and Vous d'Afrique. Restez connectés.